Welcome to another episode of the Data Revolution podcast. Today, my guest is Catherine Flick, who I have known and who I have followed around the various social media platforms since Twitter started to decline, even on the recently demised Pebble app. Hello, Catherine.
Hi, Kate. It's nice to be here. I feel like I've been following you around for quite a bit longer than that, but it's nice to know that you're sort of reciprocating that now, because I think we've got a lot of shared interests, which is great.
Yeah, well, I was looking at your research interests, and there's a whole pile of stuff that I'm really interested in. And I see that you've got a crossover between you're a STEAM person, so you're an arts and a computer science kind of person.
Yeah, so at the moment I'm a reader in computing and social responsibility. So I'm actually a technology ethicist. So I kind of feel like I bridge the gap between kind of philosophy and technology, but particularly in terms of the ethical and social impact. And I'm actually about to finish that job up like literally in a week and a half or so. And I'm moving to Staffordshire University, where I'm going to become a professor in ethics and games technology. And I think that's probably the first of that sort of type of professorship in the world, which is quite exciting to me as well. So yeah. I guess what I really do is I try to kind of translate. I see myself as a bit of a bridge. So I sort of try to translate technology to people that might be affected by it in, usually in potentially negative ways. But then I also try to kind of translate back again and help industry understand what the impact of their technologies might be. And I've worked with everything from small companies through to really large companies in European-based projects. And I've done all sorts of random bits and pieces. So I've worked on online child protection. I do stuff obviously in video games. I wrote a whole paper about how terrible NFTs are. So I did a lot of stuff in the crypto kind of world when that was all kind of kicking off. And I mean, yeah, lots of weird little bits and pieces along the side. I think one of my favorite papers that I've ever written was one about the ethics and archaeology of chickens in video games. So there you go.
Well, I'm really interested in what you're working on now, because you were telling me about your work with the Digital Observatory, which was quite interesting. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the professorship in video games is I'm kind of like trying to. I mean, I'm a generalist technology ethicist, but in the most recent years, I've been really interested in how video games kind of interact with society and the societal impact, and how we create. I mean, because obviously video games is like an artistic endeavor, but it also has quite a significant social impact. I mean, we see all the kind of moral panics around violence and addiction and all of this, and I think there's a lot of space still to be kind of sorted out in terms of what's actually really the impact that is happening and what's just kind of what we think the impact might be, right? And a lot of the issue that we have with that is that industry is not particularly keen on sharing data with academics in particular. I mean, they're all quite happy to kind of hype up their own kind of, wellness, well-being. Usually a lot of things are centered around, but well-being. So, I mean, you saw all the kind of the Pokemon Go from a couple of years ago, how that was kind of talked about in terms of well-being and getting people out and walking and things like that. I mean, so we have like quite positive potential social impacts as well. And it's just, I sort of, really want to the next, I don't know, however many years it takes me, I want to kind of sort out the fact from fiction a little bit and kind of work out where these actual real impacts kind of lie and how we can kind of harness those positive impacts from, and mitigate or prevent the negative ones. And one of the ways I'm doing this is working with some friends of mine that I met through, actually the internet, good old internet, once again, Twitter, I think it was.
From the internet.
I know the best collaborations were back pre-Musk Twitter, and I lament the demise of Twitter, because I mean, we've all moved to these different places, but it's not quite the same, and you sort of find, anyway, it's all fragmented now. It's not quite as good as it used to be. But anyway, I met some friends, and basically after a few years of collaborating with them informally, we've decided to kind of work. We worked really well together. And as you probably know in academia, when you find people that you work really well together with, you tend to stick around with them. And so, yeah, we've formed this Digital Observatory Research Cluster, where we look at data-driven we want to look at what the data is actually telling us in terms of the actual social impact of games. So we've actually got collaboration with Unity, which is the big video game company that creates all the engines that people make video games with. We have access to several years of their data in terms of their playtime and monetization. And part of what I've been doing is making sure that we work with that in an ethical manner. And because obviously, we've got billions and billions and billions of hours of playtime that we can access. We want to make sure we can't identify people or whatever, but we also want to make sure that we can find some interesting things out, in the process, but do so in a socially beneficial way, but also an ethical way. So one of the, we've been really keen on looking at actually how does monetization look? What does it actually look like? Because I mean, a lot of this stuff hasn't even industry is so stingy, I want to say, but in a positive way. They're not super forthcoming with data, and so the fact that we've got this massive data lake just to kind of paddle around in is the most incredible thing for us, and we're really excited about all the
such a huge pile of data, and they must track just about everything.
Yeah, they really do. So, I mean, the sorts of data we have access to is things, so we can track what we can see when we look at obviously they have a lot more data. They
don't give it all to you.
No, they don't give it all to us. That would be quite unethical in many ways, and also probably not great for their IP and things like that. But what they do give us access to is the playtime that somebody had, an individual has within one game. So let's say you really like playing Baldur's Gate or something. That's not made with Unity, but you get the idea. If you really like playing Baldur's Gate, we can track you as an anonymous individual, how long you play for, basically when you play and how long you play for, right? And just within that game. So we can't track you in between games. So we can't, if you go off and play, I don't know, something else, we can't track that you're switching between games or anything. But what we can do is track any individual
people across multiple games. All right.
No. So that's one of the stipulations we had, because we didn't want to build profiles of people. We wanted to build profiles of kind of games, because that it seemed a bit more sensible to do it that way, basically. Mm-hmm. And we also have access to monetization data as well. So if your game has got, if a Unity game uses Unity Analytics and it has the Unity in-app purchases, so we don't track ads, unfortunately. We don't have access to that because that's a third-party thing, from what I can tell. But we have access to all the monetization from in-app purchases that are made through Unity Kit, right? So we can find out what you've bought, how you buy it, when you've bought it, if it's late at night or if it's early in the morning, or how frequently you buy it, all that sort of stuff. And then we can kind of map out what the monetization of a game looks like. So we can see how much a particular game has made. We can see what the actual structure of that monetization looks like. So if it peaks very early on and then kind of dribbles off, or if it kind of steadily increases over time, or we can follow things like when new things are added to a shop, for example, stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, there's lots of stuff we can actually kind of follow, which is really cool.
What have been the most interesting insights so far?
So we've got 4 main papers that we've published out so far. So it's within the last year and a half or so. It's about 2 years actually. We've been working together on this. We've got they're all really interesting. That's the thing. I mean, so one of the big ones we've done is we've kind of mapped out what mobile game monetization looks like, and what sorts of, basically, if you want to make a mobile game, what might the pattern of monetization look like in terms of in terms of different genres. So if you make kind of like a collectible card game, I don't know, let's say Pokemon card games. I'm not a card game person. Yeah. If you make something like that for a mobile, what might it look like, right? And so we've got sort of spending pattern analyses of different genres of games. So unsurprisingly, actually maybe not unsurprisingly, because I didn't even really know that this kind of category existed, because I guess it doesn't really appeal to me. But it turns out that if you want to make a game that makes loads of money, make a social casino game.
What is a social casino? Hold on a sec.
So social casino games. So basically it's gambling, but you don't actually get any money. So you pay money to play, but you just get
don't win any money.
Well, you win in-game coins so you can keep playing, but that's it. You don't get a payout or anything.
I just don't understand. I'm a very different kind of person to those people because I don't understand gambling. I went to the RSL club with my husband one time and we put $20 in and we made $100 and I was like, yeah, let's go home now. And he was like, what? We just got here. And I was like, yeah, but we made money. We should leave.
Yeah, no, well, I guess this game was made for you then, because it really is about, like, I mean, they call them I mean, I don't know how much social there is to social casinos, but I mean, the idea is that you just get the I guess the kick of winning without, see, you don't even it's not even got to do with like losing or winning money back or anything like that, right? Like it's really about it's really about kind of like just playing for fun, I guess, and that's how they kind of frame it, right? So they're not allowed to give, like, if they give payouts, and Apple or Google tend to kick them off the App Store. So that's one of the rules, and a lot of them will say, like, they have all these like disclaimers saying this is not, you don't win any real money and all this, but I guess it hits the same.
Okay, so it's just a concept to me.
Yeah, it hits all the same dopamine kind of receptor things, I guess. And like, I mean, because they're so good at kind of tapping into very psychological triggers, right? In terms of, even if you feel like you're winning, if you feel like it doesn't really matter in some ways if it's real money or money that keeps you able to play, right? Because I mean, a lot of people go to the casino, they start out, as you say, with $100 or whatever, but then they play until they run out of that money, right? Like and so for them it's not so much about the winning the money, it's more about the playing, continuing to play. So I guess that's kind of what they're tapping into. So that's one of the ones. I mean, if you want to make a classic kind of game where you have little pretty skins and things like that, you might end up with a more stable like there's different kind of patterns, but like we're trying to see if there was like a nice kind of sustainable method of making money ethically within games, and we haven't quite got to that point yet. Like, we've only just done the first stage where we've mapped out what they actually look like. So the next stage is now to look at how do you actually, like, what might you, if you want to make a nice sustainable mobile game that makes you some money, what does that look like in terms of what we understand about monetization? So that's the next step, really. But then we also
are you also looking at the correlation between things like the reward sounds and the reward visuals?
Right. So this is also another like, the thing is, this data set opens up so much that there's only 4 of us. Well, and we got so it's 4 key people, and then we've got some postdocs and stuff working with us, and some PhD students working with us.
You need more postdocs.
Yeah, we definitely need more postdocs. I need to get my grant engine back up and running. I've been on maternity leave for a year, and we had a grant that went in, but the research council we submitted it to said, oh, we like it, but it's not in our remit. We don't feel like it's in our remit. You should send it to this other one, and we just didn't quite get there yet. But we will.
Hold on a sec. Let's just take that diversion. So you've just been appointed professor, and you've just been on maternity leave. That's pretty interesting. That doesn't happen very often.
No, it doesn't. I've actually had 2 babies in the last 5 years, so I've been on 2 lots of maternity leave in the last 5 years. But I think it's definitely a lot of props to Staffordshire University for picking me up. Despite that, I think it's actually because I had a lot of stuff that was on the go. And then as I was on maternity leave, like, the publication system like takes a while to kind of keep. Yeah, and so
you had some in the pipeline.
Yeah, basically I had a bunch in the pipeline to kind of keep the reputation going. But I mean, they were good publications. We had a Nature Human Behavior paper and things like that. So it's pretty good papers and things. So I think that helped. But but
well done to you, and well done
thanks
to Staffordshire, for appointing you.
Yeah, no, I think it's really, I mean, it's a good sign of the university if they're willing to kind of take someone that has been on maternity leave for quite a while, and they're especially the senior stage. But I mean, I think it would be a very different case if I were more junior, because I wouldn't have had all that stuff happening, boiling around on in the background, if you know what I mean. So I mean, it's having children later in life is a choice that I made, and I'm glad that I did it, obviously, but it's not a choice that everyone can always make either. So yeah, it's an interesting space being a sort of a senior academic, senior woman academic, because there is a lot of, I mean, I think also different sorts of universities are a bit more kind of old fashioned, and they might not have looked at that as being of benefit, like having, working kind of parent. But anyway, I'm very pleased to be moving to Staffordshire. And I'm very excited about what my role's going to, what I'm going to keep, plugging away at all this sort of stuff and nurturing new researchers and things like that. So I'm very excited about it. Yeah.
Oh, it sounds fabulous. All right. So sorry for that diversion, but it's just something
That's okay.
I thought was worth asking the question about.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the other really interesting one that I thought was cool was, so the other paper that we did was, I mean, there's a bunch of different papers, but the other one that I really liked was the fact that we looked at what impact COVID had on gameplay. So we looked back at data before COVID. So we looked at a year's worth of data before COVID, and then we looked at the data during COVID, and we mapped it against all of the, and we have global data, right? So we mapped it against all of the different countries that published what their lockdown, their different phases and stages and types of lockdown type responses to COVID were. And we mapped those against those and saw, we looked to see which types of mechanisms for, controlling COVID had the most impact, right? So have a guess. What do you think? So, I mean, we sort of had so there was kind of all together lockdown, everybody don't go outside
Melbourne,
your house, except
Melbourne.
Yeah. Well, all of the UK for a very long time, and even more so in Leicester, where I am. So it was a total lockdown. There was schools being shut. There was workplaces being shut just generally, but otherwise you could move around. There was no contact with other people type, don't have any parties or whatever. No Christmas parties, in one case for us, stuff like that. Yeah. So what do you think was the most impactful?
Oh, I don't know. I would just go to the lock everybody up and don't let anybody out.
So surprisingly, no, it was actually the schools being locked down had the most impact.
Oh, because kids they are just little petri dishes.
Well, while you're working, you want them to be distracted doing stuff. I mean, this is just speculation, right? But I think it's reasonable speculation. So you whack them in front of a video game, off you go, right? Or TV or whatever. But it was, we suspect that was probably what it had something to do with.
Oh, well, that's really interesting. Yeah, because I think there's been a really interesting set of people with strongly held few opinions about what's happening. What happened with COVID, and we need more data. We need more studies like that.
And I think it's the important thing about this particular paper was that it was really we only saw a short-term impact as well. So it's not like everyone went, stopped working or stopped going to school and then started playing games and kept playing games. Even when things opened back up again, it was very much a short-term thing. I think there was a lot of concern about screen times, especially for children and stuff as a result of COVID. And so this, I mean, certainly from the data that we saw, there's no real, we didn't find any impact that it had a longer term effect, basically. So I think that's actually quite that's a positive finding. It was most of the lockdown policies just didn't have any impact at all. People just played games the way they normally did, and that's probably because people were mostly still working, but working from home, we think. But obviously we don't have evidence for why these things are, and this is why doing these kind of low level studies that just show what was going on in the data is a really good basis for then going in and delving deep into some of these results. And that's kind of what I want to start doing when I take up my new role.
Do you have any idea what the profiles look like before, during, and after with each country on a country by country basis?
Yeah, so that's another one, a fun one that we did. So we looked at actually how do countries around the world play? How do they actually, how can we cluster, are there any clusters of how people play? We wanted to see if there was a culture of play, right? In terms of countries. And normally, traditionally, we sort of when you talk about video games, we talk about like how there's kind of like we talk about like the North American and kind of European and like probably Australian as well. So basically kind of the Anglosphere, I want to call it, but also plus Europe. We sort of assume that they all play the same, right? And then we assume as well that sort of East Asia generally plays the same, because we talk a lot about like Japanese video game play culture, and there's also a big Chinese market, and we assume that they have a similar sort of a particular culture that plays differently from these other places. And we actually, what we found was surprisingly that wasn't the case. In fact, we had a whole bunch of like the countries. So for example, USA, Canada, Japan, and Russia all play much the same way, but they play differently from Europe and China, who play the same way as each other. So that was quite an interesting finding.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So they tend to have like mobile. So we were looking particularly at mobile gaming, and we weren't looking at PC or console games, but we're looking very much at mobile gaming.
Mm-hmm.
But it's some of these things we can kind of speculate as to why, but there are a lot that we have no idea why they play in certain ways, right? So for example, with the we call it the E-type cluster, which is the one with Australia, Russia, and North America. They have kind of it's very, very common to play games, and there's a well-established layer of heavily engaged players, is what we call it. And then but then in Europe we have they're very, very unequal gaming cultures. So there's a strong layer of extremely engaged players, but we looked at things like the monetization practices and stuff as well. And so it was very much about kind of like playtime. We didn't look at monetization for that one. We looked at like the playtime per capita, and there were some people that played a lot, and then not like some people that didn't play very much at all. So that's what we call an unequal gaming culture. Whereas in Australia and the US, etc., it was mostly fairly equal. Like mostly people played much the same. So it's kind of interesting. So we can kind of like, yeah, it was. Then there's these very, 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 very highly engaged players and it's mostly in places like Hong Kong and Singapore and like Macau and some of these East Asian countries but they're very, very tiny. We call that the wealthy East Asian territories with the highest play time per capita, with extreme gameplay, the top 1% of players accounting for almost 58% of total play time. So it was a really, really heavily weighted sector of the gaming of mobile gaming there. So it was very, very interesting. Yeah.
So are you thinking of supplementing your research with things like focus groups or anything to delve into?
Yes, I mean, like I said, we're basically doing kind of the very fun, what we would consider to be kind of the fundamental research, like what do the pictures actually look like, right? And then I can see certainly for the next sort of 10 years or so, really getting into some of these. Okay, so we've got these fundamental studies. Why are these cultures similar, right?
And so we can go in and anthropological stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah,
that sounds like fun.
Yeah, it is, like, right. I know. I mean, I'm an ethicist, and like, so I mean, people often say, well, what does an ethicist do? And I kind of like, I mean, I'm a philosopher, I'm a sociologist, I'm an anthropologist, I'm a computer scientist, I'm all of these things kind of packaged in, I guess, one little bundle. And I really love just getting out and getting into data and getting into like talking to people and finding out their stories. And I mean, I find this stuff really exciting. And I guess that's, but I want to make sure like that everything that I do is looking at this kind of social technological kind of crossover, right? So I mean, another hat that I wear is I'm the vice chair of the ACM Committee on Professional Ethics, and I really kind of want to make sure that all the things that I do and that my research, like any of my collaborations, that we have a very high ethical standard, and we kind of abide by the ACM's code of ethics. But yeah, it's
how does that align with university ethics?
Well, the ACM is the Association of Computing Machinery. It's one of the biggest professional organizations for computing.
I am a member.
Yeah, good on you. So you would have you would have agreed to abide by the Code of Ethics, which I helped to write, the rewrite of it recently in 2018. Basically it's different from research ethics in that it's not so much about like consent and like kind of the minutiae of doing a piece of research. It's more about kind of an aspirational guide of how do we create technology and how do we create research about technology in ways that are beneficial to society, right? And so things like centering all that we do on the human rather than say profit or, I guess personal gain in some way, right? Whether that's through status
personal prejudice, like some of our billionaires.
Yeah, right. That's a whole other episode, that one. But yeah, so things like that where we want to sort of make sure that we've got so it's about more understanding the context in which we create technology and the fact that we have to think outside of our own very limited experience with in terms of things like the impact of that, right? So if we're creating technology and we're only testing it on people from our neighborhood, it's probably going to have a very specific, it'll have a very specific focus. Whereas if we make sure we diversify our, like the people that we test it with or the people that we consult along the way, in fact, and we should be including people at the beginning rather than just waiting to the end, right? That we make technology, we make research that has a beneficial impact for these community, for all communities, not just the ones that we're specifically interested in, but ones that could be potentially impacted further down the line, right? So I guess that's kind of like, and the ACM Code of Ethics has got a load of specific things like, there's a whole conversation about the things that changed between then and the old version from 1992 and the new version from 2018, not to mention the fact that computer security has changed slightly. The previous Code of Ethics was like locked doors to server rooms, and these days we're like, oh my God, yeah. You probably need to do a little bit more than that,
Well, when I was running my first system in the 90s, we didn't even consider security because there was nobody trying to hack in.
No,
the world has changed a bit.
I did web programming back in like 99, 2000. We were running MySQL databases with root access with no passwords. And this was on public facing websites. Like, that's just how it was. Nobody was like, this cross server scripting wasn't invented like then, yeah, that was the good old days, wasn't it?
The good old days, yeah.
The wild west of the internet, back before there were regulations.
Well, some people are still building that way, sad to say. Like you run across sad
but
things
I think
like
we can probably agree that running open MySQL databases with it's probably not the most safe thing to do.
The number of times I find an unencrypted S3 bucket on the internet is just astonishing. Anyway, but
no, I'm not astonished actually, because people just think, oh well, I don't have it, like I haven't, it's not listed on Google, therefore it doesn't exist and stuff like that, right?
I like to show people Shodan. Let me just Google your company. Let's look on Shodan. Anyway,
yeah, right, yeah, so, it's crazy, but yeah. So ethics, good.
It has been an utter delight to finally chat with you. Thank you so much, Catherine, and thanks for joining me.
No, thanks very much. I've had a lovely time.
And that is it for another episode of the Data Revolution podcast. I'm Kate Crothers. Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to give the show a nice review and a like on your podcast app of choice. See you next time.